The letter wasn't the hardest thing I brought to that kitchen table. The hardest thing was staying quiet long enough to let them read it. I set the envelope down between the butter dish and my son-in-law's coffee mug, folded my hands in my lap, and waited. My daughter picked it up first. She turned it over once, like she was checking for a return address that wasn't there. Then she looked at me, and I saw it, that flicker behind her eyes that I'd been watching for the better part of 3 years. The one that showed up whenever I wasn't doing exactly what she'd planned for me to do. "Mom," she said, "what is this?" "Open it," I said. "I made copies." I should tell you about the house first, not the house my daughter lives in now, the one my husband and I bought in 1987 in a neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio, where the maple trees went orange every October and the neighbors still waved from their driveways. The house I raised her in, the house where I learned to do everything myself after Raymond passed 9 years ago this past March. 42 years as a nurse, and I can tell you, grief has its own recovery timeline and nobody rushes it for you. I retired at 63. Not because I had to. I was still sharp, still on my feet for 12-hour shifts, still the one the younger nurses came to when a patient's family was falling apart in the hallway. I retired because Raymond had always wanted us to travel, and I decided I was going to do it anyway. For him, and then for me. I spent 3 weeks in Portugal the first year, drove the Pacific Coast Highway the second. Took a cooking class in New Orleans and ate things I couldn't pronounce and felt, for the first time in a long time, like my life was still going somewhere. My daughter was 29 when I retired. She and her husband had been married 2 years. They lived in a nice apartment in Dublin, Ohio, the kind of suburb where every storefront has a chalkboard sign and a waiting list. He worked in tech sales. She had just made senior account manager at her firm. Between them, they were pulling in something close to $310,000 a year. I know the number because she told me. She told me often. The way people tell you things they want you to be impressed by. I was proud of her. I want to be clear about that. She worked hard. She'd always worked hard. But somewhere in the year after they got married, something shifted. The apartment became too small. Then the neighborhood became too ordinary. Then the house they bought. A 5-bedroom in a district with a good school rating, even though they didn't have children yet. That house started needing things. A finished basement, a new deck, a kitchen that finally made sense. I helped with the down payment. I want to be honest about that too. $40,000, because Raymond and I had saved carefully and I had more than I needed and she was my daughter and I loved her. I didn't attach conditions. I didn't ask for anything in return. I signed a gift letter and handed over a cashier's check and drove home feeling like I'd done something right. That was the beginning of them thinking I was a resource. My son-in-law, I'll call him what my daughter calls him when she's proud of him, which is my husband who works so hard, is not a bad man. I want to say that clearly. He is not cruel, not abusive, not even particularly selfish in the way some men are. He is, however, very good at agreeing with whatever my daughter decides and then presenting it to me like it was a joint conclusion they'd arrived at together after careful thought. He did that the first time they asked me about the baby. They'd been trying for about a year. Then they weren't trying anymore, they were expecting, and the due date was in April, and my daughter called me on a Tuesday night in November to tell me, and I cried. Happy tears, real ones. I drove down the following weekend with a onesie and a bottle of good champagne for her and her husband and sparkling cider for her because she couldn't drink, and we sat on their new deck and I thought, this is supposed to feel like. 3 weeks later, my daughter called again. Mom, we need to talk about childcare. I said of course whenever she wanted. I figured she'd ask me to look at daycare options with her, maybe help her compare a few places. I had no idea. We've been running the numbers, she said. And honestly, the good daycares around here are anywhere from $2,200 to $2,800 a month for an infant. And we just don't think that makes sense. I agreed it was expensive. I asked which centers she'd looked at. That's the thing, Mom. We don't want to do daycare. We want someone we trust, someone who's already family. A pause. You're retired, you have the time. I held the phone for a second. You want me to watch the baby, I said, full-time. Just until she starts pre-K. That's only 3.5 years. She said it the way you'd say, just a short drive or just a quick favor. You'd basically be moving in with us, or we'd figure out the logistics, but moving in. Just during the week. You could go home on weekends. I didn't say anything right away. I was 66 years old. I had a life. I had a garden and a book club and a trip to the Canadian Rockies I'd been planning since February. I had knees that weren't what they used to be, and a lower back that required a specific mattress and a morning routine that took longer than it used to, because I'd finally started being kind to myself about it. Let me think about it, I told her. Of course, she said. But don't think too long. We need to get this figured out. I did think about it. For 2 weeks, I thought about almost nothing else. I made a list, one of those old-fashioned yellow legal pad lists that Raymond used to tease me about. On one side, I wrote what I'd be giving up. On the other side, I wrote what I'd be gaining. The gaining side had real things on it. Time with my grandchild, being present for the early years, the particular joy of watching someone become a person. The giving up side had real things too, my independence, my routines, my plans, and, if I was being honest with myself, something harder to name, the sense that my life after Raymond wasn't a placeholder, that I wasn't just waiting to be useful to someone else again. I called my sister, who lives outside Phoenix and has always been the one in our family who says the thing nobody wants to say. They want you to move in and be their nanny, she said, flatly. They want me to help with, full-time, 5 days a week, for 3.5 years. That's not helping, that's a job. Are they paying you? I hadn't asked. I realized then that I hadn't asked. Call me back after you ask, she said. I called my daughter that evening. I tried to keep my voice light, practical, just working out the details. I was thinking we should talk about the arrangement, I said, the day-to-day logistics. And whether some grandparents do get compensated for full-time care. The silence on the other end was exactly 3 seconds long. I counted. Mom, you'd be doing this for your grandchild, not for us, for her. I understand that. I just think if I'm providing full-time care. We're not hiring you. You're her grandmother. She said it so gently. That was the part that got me. She said it the way you'd correct a child who'd misunderstood something obvious. And for a moment, I almost apologized. Right, I said. Let me keep thinking. What I started doing in those next few weeks was paying attention. Not in a suspicious way, just in the way that a woman who spent 4 decades assessing patient situations learns to do without meaning to. I started noticing things. My daughter and her husband drove 2 cars. His was a 3-year-old Audi. Hers was a brand new Tahoe she'd gotten in September, fully loaded, with heated seats and a panoramic sunroof. I know this because she sent me a photo the day she picked it up. They belonged to a country club in New Dublin. I'd been there twice for Sunday brunch. Nice place, white tablecloths, a golf course I'd never seen anyone actually use. The membership she'd mentioned once ran about $800 a month. They had a cleaning service, every other week, $320 per visit. They ate out a lot, not fast food, not casual. The kind of dinners where the entrees don't have prices on the menu, because if you're asking, you shouldn't be there. None of this is a crime. They earned their money and they spent it how they chose. But I was being asked to give up 3.5 years of my life, and the math wasn't sitting right with me. I got out my laptop one Sunday afternoon, the same one I use for my book club's email chain and my travel research. And I started a spreadsheet. I'm not an accountant. I'm a retired nurse. But I was married to a man who believed in knowing exactly where every dollar went. And some of that stuck. I pulled up what I knew, made reasonable estimates for what I didn't, and I laid it all out. Their take-home after taxes on $310,000 gross, approximately $195,000 to $200,000 annually. Roughly $16,500 a month. Mortgage on a 5-bedroom in their district, $4,200. 2 car payments, roughly $400 combined. Country club, $800. Cleaning service, $640 a month. Dining out, I estimated conservatively at $1,200. I suspect it was higher. Subscriptions, gym memberships, the wine club she'd joined, another $400 at minimum. That was already over $8,600 a month before groceries, utilities, insurance, or the credit card bill I knew existed because she'd mentioned refinancing it once, very casually, then changed the subject. Daycare for one infant. $2,400 at the center she'd told me about. Total with daycare. Somewhere around $11,000 a month against $16,500 take home. Tight, but workable. Absolutely workable. The kind of tight that requires choices, not miracles. I looked at that spreadsheet for a long time. Then I started a second tab. My daughter's mother-in-law, my son-in-law's mother, is a woman named Beverly. She and I have met 6 or 7 times over the years, at holidays and the wedding, and once at a birthday party for my son-in-law that my daughter organized at the country club. Beverly is pleasant. She's a retired school teacher, lives 40 minutes away in Westerville, widowed about 5 years ago. We don't have a close relationship, but I've always thought well of her. What I didn't know, what I found out 3 months into this whole conversation, entirely by accident, was that Beverly had been helping with the baby, too. Or rather, she'd been helping before there was a baby. My daughter let it slip during a phone call about something else entirely. She mentioned that Beverly came over on Tuesdays to help out with things around the house. She likes to feel useful, my daughter said, very breezily, and then something about Beverly having helped them get organized before the nursery was finished. Does she come every Tuesday? I asked. Most of them. That's nice of her, I said carefully. Does she? Are you compensating her for her time? My daughter laughed. Not unkindly, but definitively. Of course not, she's family. I waited a moment. Right, but there was something in her voice, a slight rounding at the edge of the word family. And I thought about Beverly driving 40 minutes each way to help out on Tuesdays, and my daughter saying she likes to feel useful, and I thought about how easy it is to let someone feel like their time isn't worth counting. I didn't bring it up again. Not then. What I did was call Beverly. We hadn't spoken one-on-one before, ever. I think she was surprised to hear from me. But she's a straightforward woman, a former school teacher, and when I told her why I was calling, carefully, without any agenda I was admitting to, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, I drive over there every Tuesday, and I leave exhausted, and I haven't told them no because I don't know how. We talked for an hour. By the end, I knew everything. Beverly wasn't just helping. Beverly had been handling pickups, returns, organizing closets, taking their dog to vet appointments, waiting for deliveries. And she'd mentioned once, very gently, that she might appreciate gas money for the drive. And my daughter had said, Beverly, you're doing this for your grandchild. And Beverly had nodded and let it go. My daughter had used that line on both of us. The conversation that changed everything happened at their house on a Thursday evening in March, about 6 weeks before the baby was due. They'd invited me to dinner. My son-in-law made pasta. He's a decent cook, and there was good bread and a salad, and it felt warm and normal, and I thought for a moment that maybe I'd been overthinking everything. Then my daughter said, Mom, we were hoping to finalize the childcare plan tonight. She's coming in 6 weeks, and we need to have everything set. I said I understood. My son-in-law said, We were thinking you'd start the Monday after she's born. We figured a week for the hospital and recovery, and then... I've also been thinking, my daughter said, cutting in the way she does when she's been rehearsing, that it might make more sense for you to just stay here. We have the guest room. You'd have your own bathroom, and it would be so much easier than commuting. I looked at my pasta. And honestly, she continued, it's kind of perfect timing. You don't have any major trips planned until fall, right? I have the Rockies trip in July, I said. Right, well, we'd work around that. Or honestly, by July she'd be 3 months old, and we might be able to figure out something for just those 2 weeks. Might be able to figure out something. I mean, Beverly could probably cover. And there it was. Beverly as backup. Beverly as the contingency plan. Beverly, who drove 40 minutes every Tuesday and came home exhausted and hadn't been given so much as a thank you gift card. I put my fork down. I reached into the bag I'd brought and I took out the envelope. Before we finalize anything, I said, I'd like us to look at something together. The spreadsheet printout was 4 pages. I'd formatted it clearly, I used to teach the new nurses how to document patient charts, so I know how to make information readable. I'd labeled every column. I'd included a notes section at the bottom of each page. Shh. My daughter took the first page, and her expression went through 3 changes in about 4 seconds. Her husband leaned over to read it with her. The first page was their monthly budget as I estimated it. I'd been conservative everywhere. I'd lowballed the dining and rounded down on the memberships. I wanted to be fair. The second page was a side-by-side, their current monthly expenses versus their monthly expenses if they replaced one car with a more modest vehicle, suspended the country club membership for 3 years, reduced dining out by half, and cut the cleaning service to once a month. With those changes, they could cover $2,400 a month in daycare and still have over $3,000 of monthly breathing room they didn't currently have. The third page was a simple note. I'd written it the night before. Read it 4 times and trimmed it until it was exactly what I meant and nothing extra. I love you, and I love this baby already more than I can say. I want to be in her life in every way that is real and present and joyful. What I cannot do is trade my retirement for a second career I haven't chosen. I am 66 years old. These years are mine. I will be the grandmother who shows up for birthdays, who takes her to the museum, who reads to her every Sunday, who she calls when she's a teenager and needs to talk to someone who isn't her mother. I will not be the live-in employee. I am offering you the truth about your finances because I love you. I am asking you to look at your choices because I believe you can make better ones. My daughter read it twice. I watched her. My son-in-law was still on page 2, frowning at the numbers. "Where did you get all of this?" my daughter asked. "Some of it you've told me over the years. Some of it I estimated. If I'm wrong anywhere, tell me." She didn't say I was wrong anywhere. "Mom," her voice had shifted, not angry yet, something more complicated. "This feels like you prepared this like you were building a case." I prepared it because I wanted to have an honest conversation, and I knew I'd lose my nerve if I didn't write it down. My son-in-law looked up. "The club membership," he said, "is a business expense. I use those golf relationships." "Then it might be tax deductible," I said. "That's worth looking into. But it's still $800 a month." He looked back at the page. My daughter said, "What about Beverly? We were going to ask her too." "I know you were," I said. "I know what you were going to ask her. Beverly and I have spoken." The room changed. It's the only way I can describe it. Not louder, quieter, but differently quiet. "You talked to Beverly," my daughter repeated. "She's a good woman. She's been helping you every Tuesday for 4 months, and she doesn't feel like she can say no." I wanted her to know that someone had noticed. I want to tell you what happened next, because people always want to know, and the answer is both simpler and harder than you'd expect. My daughter didn't yell. I had half expected her to. She has always expressed things loudly when she's caught off guard. But she didn't. She sat with the pages for a long time, and then she excused herself to get more water, and I heard the refrigerator open and close twice, which is what she does when she's thinking. My son-in-law and I sat at the table together. He looked at the spreadsheet. After a while, he said, "The Tahoe payment is $870 a month." I didn't say anything. I told her the pilot would have been fine, he said. Not to me, really. To the table. When my daughter came back, she sat down and she didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "I don't know why I thought you'd just say yes, because I usually do," I said. "I think that's fair." She looked at me then, really looked at me, the way she used to when she was young and she'd gotten in trouble and she was trying to figure out how much I already knew. "I think I forgot that you had things going on, of your own." It wasn't an apology, but it was the most honest thing she'd said to me in 3 years, maybe longer. I reached across and put my hand over hers. "I'm going to be the best grandmother that baby has ever had," I said. "But you have to let me do it on my terms, not yours." The baby came on a Tuesday. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, the most perfect forehead I've ever seen in my life. And when they put her in my arms in that hospital room, I completely forgot every spreadsheet and every tense dinner and every careful sentence I'd rehearsed. Her name is Rosie. I drive down every Sunday. We have a whole system. I bring breakfast things. My daughter makes coffee, and we sit together in the morning while Rosie does whatever it is that 6-month-old babies do, which is mostly look at the ceiling and reconsider their entire existence. My son-in-law and I have gotten easier with each other. He traded in the Audi for a Subaru Outback, which I didn't expect, and he mentioned it once without making a big deal of it, and I did the same. They enrolled Rosie in a daycare center 3 weeks after she was born. A good one, small, warm, family-owned. The director has been there for 14 years. It cost $2,100 a month. They paused the country club. Beverly and I have lunch every few weeks. We went to a matinee last month, a film she'd wanted to see, and afterward we sat in the parking lot for 45 minutes just talking. She told me that my phone call last winter was the first time in years someone had asked how she was doing without really meaning what can you do for us. You saved me, she said. You saved yourself, I said. I just handed you the permission slip. She laughed. She has a good laugh. I went to the Canadian Rockies in July as planned. I hiked a trail. I had no business hiking for a woman of my age with my knees. And I stood at the top and felt the cold air come off the glacier and thought about Raymond and thought about Rosie and thought about the version of myself I'd almost given away without meaning to. The week I got back, my daughter called to tell me Rosie had started reaching for things, grabbing at whatever she could get her hands on. A spoon, a blanket, someone's finger. She grabbed my hair today, my daughter said, laughing, and she would not let go. She knows what she wants, I said. A pause, and then my daughter said, I wonder where she gets that from. I smiled into the phone. I thought, from me. Finally, from me.